Hello, thank you for joining this webinar today. I would like to begin by introducing myself. My name is Kelsey Gordon. I am a third-year doctoral student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I am also a graduate-level project assistant with the Birch Project. Within this webinar series, this is Module 5, which will be focused on social, emotional, and behavioral screening administration. I will also refer to this term as SEB screening throughout this presentation. The objective of this module is to discuss best practices and logistical planning considerations for school and district leaders that are at the stage of administering an SEB screener. Before beginning, I would also like to acknowledge and thank the Birch Project leadership team whom are supporting this work. Thank you to both Dr. Melissa Perot from the University of Massachusetts Boston and Dr. Sarah Whitcomb from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Before diving into our content, I would also like to introduce the Birch Project to those of you joining us for the first time in this module series. The Birch Project is the Behavioral Health Integrated Resources for Children project. Its mission is to provide professional development and resources for schools, as well as to strengthen the coordination of behavioral health supports across school and community agencies. The Birch Project is led by faculty members from UMass Boston and UMass Amherst, and is sponsored by Boston Children's Hospital. For more information, please visit our website at umb.edu/birch. As previously mentioned, this is the 5th module in an 8-part series that guides school leaders through best practices for utilizing universal social, emotional, and behavioral screening to support the wellness of our students. Please feel free to visit the links below in the webinar description in order to access any of the previous or following webinars. Here's an overview of our module today. Our objectives will be to first discuss screening administration best practices, addressing the question, is your school or district aligning with best practice recommendations when administering school-wide SEB screening? And secondly, to provide direction for resource and logistical planning for administration procedures. Best practice recommendations include informing students and families about screening procedures well in advance, obtaining student assent and parent consent, rolling out initial screening efforts gradually, planning for the logistics of implementation, identifying needed resources, and the establishment of a well-defined plan to support students with most immediate risk. When informing students and families about screening procedures, school teams can use a diverse array of communication methods, from phone calls and text messages to the use of the school website, printed flyers, or discussions within parent-teacher conferences and meetings, or open house nights. The purpose of conveying this information across multiple formats and multiple contexts is to ensure that all students and all families have equitable access to understanding both the goal of an SEB screening and the procedures that will be involved in the screening administration process. These communication tools can be used to share information such as when the screening will occur, what the screening process will look like, how long the screening administration is, who will be expected to complete the screener, how the results will be used, and how and when caregivers will be informed of student screening results. Another critical component of SEB screening administration involves obtaining caregiver permission and student agreement to participate in the screening process. Caregiver consent is defined as an opportunity to be informed of the screening process, as well as being given the opportunity to opt in or opt out of the process. Student assent involves providing students with information about the screening and giving them the opportunity to agree or not agree to participate in the process. These permissions can be given either one of two ways: actively, which is via a written agreement, or passively. In these instances, caregivers have to indicate that they would not like to have their student participate. Otherwise, their non-response is indicated as consent. Again, when obtaining consent, school teams can consider using multiple communication methods that would be most accessible for your school community. That may include an electronic method, such as sending consent forms via email, or a paper pencil method, such as sending the consent forms home with students or sending them home by mail. A few explicit equity and access considerations when communicating with students and families includes ensuring that materials are translated to preferred languages or that they are adapted for specific family needs. This serves to ensure that the entire school community is not only able to access this information, but is able to be aware of and thoroughly understand the screening procedures. School teams will also want to create ample opportunities for families to provide input and have their questions and concerns addressed. This can be done through a variety of different methods, such as holding a meeting, holding an opportunity for families to come in, providing contact information for a personnel that's leading the screening process. Most importantly, school teams should seek to create a dialogue with families that is open and fluid. There are a lot of moving parts to administering an SEB screener. And with that said, it's critical to create a culture of two-way communication. That way, families feel welcome to be able to engage with and support the process. Best practice recommendations also suggest that schools and districts begin their screening administration processes gradually. What this means is working from a small scale effort to a larger scale effort. At the school level, this could look like first administering the screener to one classroom or one grade level prior to rolling out to the rest of the school. And at the district level, this could look like beginning with screening administration in one school prior to rolling out the screener to the rest of the schools across the district. Starting in small increments has many benefits. For one, it allows school and district teams to gather feedback and make adjustments and make corrections as they are needed. Additionally, it allows the team to learn from and build from their successes. All in all, gradual rollouts can be looked at as small tests of change. They can inspire and they can lead to and inspire high confidence and success with a very low cost of failure. And this is one method for building our capacity as a school community, as a district, in order to be able to screen students more readily. Equity and access considerations for an initial SEB screening administration challenge us as a school community to think critically as to if there are any students or families that are not participating in the screener. This could be for a variety of reasons, some of which are more complex, such as opting out for cultural reasons, or some of which are more logistical, such as students that were absent on the day when the screener was administered. Along these lines, we should consider and to continue discussions about the purpose and the goal of the screener, acknowledging that some questions are being answered by the screening process while others are not. We want to be thinking about other pieces of information that we would like to know, as well as problem solving and considering how we can reach out to students and families that may not be a part of the screening administration process to ensure that we are assessing their needs and supporting them in the best ways possible. These guiding questions are really about centering the screening administration process in the broader context of the school community. Another critical best practice for screening administration is having a thorough and well-defined plan for follow-up. This is especially critical for responding to any assessment results for students with the most immediate risk. As school leaders, this is our ethical obligation in ensuring that we are administering and responding to assessment data results in a way that is timely and defensible. Therefore, as we're engaging in the state of screening implementation, we want to have a clearly defined plan for data review and determining certain levels of risk. We also want to have outlined any supports and interventions that will be in place following administration. Additionally, we'll want to have well-planned procedures and staffing roles delegated for following up with students and families that are deemed to be the most vulnerable and the most at risk for harm. Ideally, for any students or families or staff that are endorsing risk of harm to themselves or others, they should be receiving immediate follow-up that same day. When determining our follow-up procedures, as school teams, we can problem solve for potential barriers to accessing services. What we know is that many of our most vulnerable families do have a variety of different constraints and barriers that they face when accessing mental health services. These could be logistical reasons. These also could be economic barriers that are in place. What we can do to support them is to plan for collaboration and coordination between our school-based supports and the community agencies that are around us in order to be able to have a brainstormed list or some ideas as to how we can support our most vulnerable families, both prior to, during, and after an SEB screening administration. Now we'll move on to identification of resources and logistics for the screening implementation, focusing in on the when and the how of administering a screener. Staffing will focus on designating specific roles and responsibilities for screening administration, as well as an overview of staff training or professional development opportunities. Choice of informants refers to whom we are choosing to complete the screener and how they will be completing them. Timing and frequency of administration will speak to when during the school day and when during the school year a screener can be administered. Method for administration will focus on how the screener will be physically administered to informants. Beginning with staffing, it's important to determine and designate roles and responsibilities to staff during a screening administration process. For example, if teaching staff are going to serve as proctors administering the survey to students, school teams may want to hold a training that will provide proctors with information on what the screener is, what the purpose of it is, how it will look, the length, as well as how to introduce the screener to students. This can also be an opportunity to review a standardized script for proctors to follow and follow up on any questions that the teaching staff may have. It's also an opportunity to discuss potential questions that may come up on screening administration day from students and how to answer and respond to those questions in a way that'll be helpful. Providing this information within these professional development opportunities will serve to better prepare staff to feel confident and knowledgeable during the screening administration process. Here are some examples of possible roles that school teams may consider for an SEB screening administration, as well as individuals that may be suitable for those roles. We have listed a lead personnel or a lead staff member as the go-to individual for troubleshooting issues on the day of administration. This may be tasked to a school administrator, such as a principal or vice principal, or possibly a mental health staff that is taking the leadership role for the screening administration. Another role is a tech specialist or tech support to assist with any technological issues as they come up. Of course, this role will be more specific to any SEB screeners that are being administered to students, staff, or families electronically. As previously mentioned, another role is that of the screening proctors. This is the individuals that will be administering the screeners. A wide variety of roles within the school can certainly have this responsibility. It may be the administrators, it may be left to teaching staff or the school mental health staff. An additional role that school teams may want to consider is that of the mental health support. This individual provides immediate support to any students, staff, and families that are experiencing distress during the screening. Of course, this will be contingent on the nature of the screening questions or the type of screener being used. School teams can certainly think flexibly about whom is best suited for these roles and responsibilities given their specific local school context, their resources available to them, and their staffing availability. And of course, this list is not exhaustive of all of the different possible roles and responsibilities that are involved in the administration process. Regarding equity, we also want to consider if any students, staff, or families will need additional support to complete the screener as accurately, reliably, and completely as possible. We can consider whom within the school community might be best suited to provide these supports as needed. And this is another instance in which we can plan to coordinate, support, and collaborate with our community partners, with our most vulnerable students and families in a partnership method. Screening administration will also involve a choice in informants. School teams should consider who will provide the most accurate, reliable, and relevant information that can be used to inform which interventions and supports are needed throughout the school. Possible informants may be teachers, it may be caregivers, or students also may be the informants, or it could be a combination of these different individuals. The purpose and the type of SEB screener selected is going to guide school teams in deciding whom would be best to complete the screener. We have here two examples of that. For example, with a high school anxiety and depression screener, the school team in this instance felt that students would be the best choice for an informant. And in the instance of an elementary school emotional and behavioral concern screener, teachers were determined to be the best choice of informants as they were observing students across multiple contexts within the school. Again, the more information, training, and preparation that we can give to informants prior to screening administration day will be crucial to ensuring that we're obtaining the most useful and most relevant information. Logistically, we also want to plan for the timing of the screening administration, ideally having a concrete plan for when during the year screening measures will be administered. For example, if we're considering having a screener being administered at the beginning of the year, we want to consider giving teachers sufficient time to get to know their students and observe them across multiple contexts. So there'll certainly be various considerations for various time points during the year. We may also want to consider timing our SEB screening with other school and district data collection periods. For example, typically academic screening is done 3 times throughout the year for many different schools and districts. We may want to mirror our SEB screening to do the same. That way we're able to assess students both academically and socially, emotionally. We can integrate this data together and have a more wholesome look at how our students are faring. How is the general wellness of our school community? And from there, intervene and put in some supports to address any issues or concerns that come up with our screening results. School teams should also specifically plan for when and where a screener can be completed. For example, in instances in which students are completing the screener, teams can think about when during the school day would be best for it to be administered. It could be before the school day begins, it may be after school, possibly during a free period or a homeroom time. It could even possibly be sent home with students to be completed. These logistical considerations will certainly vary depending on who will be filling out the screener and how long teams decide to give these individuals to complete the information. Another consideration would be thinking about environments where individuals will be able to complete the screener with any added or guided support around them. For example, if we have teachers completing the screener, it may be useful to do this during a professional development opportunity or during a faculty meeting. That way, if any questions arise or there's any confusion around any screening questions, the lead personnel that is administering the screener and going through the procedures can provide any additional support or answer questions as needed. As for the frequency of screening administration, there is no consensus on how many times schools should administer the screener. However, many schools administer academic screening 3 times a year. So therefore, SEB screening often follows a similar frequency count. Minimally, it may be useful to administer the screener at least 2 times per year. And this serves to evaluate student progress from the beginning to the end of the year, as well as to evaluate if interventions and supports are working as they are intended. Screeners could be administered via electronic methods such as Google Form and online surveys, or via paper pencil methods such as rating scales and questionnaires. This logistical question will largely be contingent on the type of screener selected and the overall accessibility for your school community. This portion of the webinar is completed in terms of providing a bit of an overview of the best practices and logistical and resource considerations for an SEB screening administration. To help guide you through this process, we're also offering a case scenario of a middle school that went through the SEB administration process recently. In this case, we have a private middle school in a rural area of a northeastern US state that is planning to administer a school-wide social emotional screening assessment to their students. They would like to administer an SEL screener that will help them to identify student strengths and needs, as well as to inform implementation of a multi-tiered continuum of supports. Meaning they're looking to administer universal supports for all students, also consider any small group supports for some individuals, and more individualized interventions for a select few students that may be more vulnerable or at a higher risk. Based on teacher input from the initial 2 months of the school year, the school administrator and counselor determined that it would be critical to assess students' feelings of well-being, present levels of anxiety, and overall perceptions of school climate. So we have essentially 3 target areas that these administrators, this school leadership team deemed to be critical at this time. The school team highlighted that the overarching goal of the student SEL survey is to identify students' current level of needs and determine how students' social emotional wellness can be best supported through whole school efforts, and to identify select few students that may be at higher risk and in need of more immediate supports. Here's a brief overview of the pre-screening administration action steps that this leadership team took. In summary, the school team identified that a significant amount of their middle school students were reporting high levels of stress and high levels of anxiety. Therefore, they recruited some of the support of university consultants nearby to help them to define their goals for an SEB screening and also choose an evidence-based and reliable screener that would be appropriately matched to their student needs. Collaboratively, they were able to create a framework for following up with interventions and supports, as well as any immediate follow-up that would be needed to be done for any students that were flagged to be particularly high risk. In the next few slides, we'll focus in on screening administration steps. However, if you would like additional guidance and support for the prerequisite steps for SEB screening, screening approaches, and selection of SEB screeners, please feel free to review modules 2, 3, and 4 of this webinar series. For logistical planning, the school team determined that they would administer the SEB screener in the fall and in the spring. These 2 time points were decided upon because the team wanted to monitor the progress of their students over the course of the school year. They were also chosen to evaluate if school-wide interventions and supports that would be implemented were effective at increasing their students' feelings of well-being, decreasing their levels of anxiety, and increasing their connectedness to school. Examples of some of the interventions that this middle school was seeking to implement were things such as an advisory period where students would be able to connect with mentors. They also were seeking to provide a bit of tier 2 supports or more targeted supports for a small group of students that were flagged to be at higher risk for anxiety. Ideally, this small group would be targeting feelings of anxiety, feelings of connectedness, and helping students to build some of those skills. Prior to administration, the school team sent caregivers information regarding the screener by email. Translation services were provided as needed, and caregivers had a significant amount of time to ask any questions and have them answered. They were given a main contact at the school, which in this instance was the counselor who was taking the leadership of the screening administration, and passive consent was obtained, meaning caregivers were given the option to have their students opt out of the screening. If they did not respond to the consent form, then that non-response was indicated as consent for their students to participate. Additional screening administration logistics included planning for training, deciding on whom would complete the screening survey, and the SEB screening timing and method for administration. Training, in this instance, teachers were trained by university level consultants. They were trained about the purpose of the student screener, and they were trained in any administration procedures. This was an opportunity for teachers to ask questions as well as clarify any concerns or have engage in an open and fluid discussion about any concerns that they had. Informants, the school team decided that middle school students were developmentally able to rate their feelings of well-being and anxiety and belonging. So self-report in this instance was deemed to be most appropriate. Regarding the screening logistics, screening was to be administered to students during homeroom through Google Forms. Their homeroom advisors were the individuals that were responsible for explaining and assisting students in person, and any remote students were also given access to the form. Again, the screening was going to be administered at 2 time points throughout the year, first in the fall and then a follow-up in the spring. Here is an overview of the roles and responsibilities assigned to different individuals for their screening process. Again, students were deemed to be the informants. They were the individuals that were going to be filling out the screener. Teachers were tasked with the responsibilities of being the proctors and administering the SEL screeners. The administrator, in this case, the principal, was tasked with organizing the date and time for the screening administration. He also was responsible for coordinating with the university level consultants. The university level consultants were available for technical assistance prior, during, and after the screening administration. They were also responsible for data collection, data storage, and the initial survey data analysis. The counselor in the school created a follow-up plan for the most high-risk students. She also collaborated with consultants on the training components and the administration day procedures, as well as data analysis plan. Again, the counselor was responsible for the critical role of following up with students and families with highest levels of risk, which in these cases was determined to be the students screened with the most severe levels of anxiety, the lowest feelings of well-being, and the lowest perceptions of school climate. Families were informed of these risk factors, and they were provided with assistance to coordinate with any community supports. Additionally, a plan for school-based intervention was communicated to these families. These are a few examples of equity considerations throughout the screening administration process. Some things that the school went ahead and did was translate screening procedures. They also had continuous open communication with families, with teachers as well. They sought to ensure that all students participated in the survey, either in person or remotely. And they developed a very thorough plan for supporting any of the most vulnerable and students and families. That completes our webinar for today. Please see these helpful resources for more information and guidance on social, emotional, and behavioral screening administration. Thank you for joining us to learn more about SEB screening administration. Thank you for your time and consideration and devotion for supporting the social and emotional wellness of our school communities. Please feel free to provide us with feedback in the link in the description of this webinar. Additionally, feel free to visit our website or subscribe to our mailing list for more information regarding best practices for supporting student behavioral health needs. Thank you.